like the breeze, country road. Sing.
It was a crash that stunned the world and left more questions than answers. John Denver wasn't just a voice of a generation. He was the soul of it. But behind the wholesome image and heartfelt lyrics was a silent storm, one that ended with a fatal crash, hidden truths, and a mystery that took decades to solve. What really happened to John Denver? And why is the truth so much darker than we were told? He was born with a name no one could pronounce. Henry John Deutschendorf Jr. Doesn't exactly scream folk icon, does it? But behind that clunky name was a boy growing up in the shadow of jets and uniforms. His father was a U.S. Air Force pilot, and home was nowhere. John moved constantly, base to base, never planting roots, never staying long enough to belong. And here's where it gets interesting. All that emptiness, that sense of not fitting in, became fuel for a dream so big, it would one day echo through stadiums, radios, and the hearts of millions. But it all started with a moment so simple, it sounds made up. At just 11 years old, his grandmother handed him a guitar. Not a fancy one, just a beat-up old six-string. That guitar, it became his escape, his therapy, his weapon. While other kids were learning to throw footballs, John was teaching himself to bend sound into emotion. He locked himself in his room and played until his fingers bled, not for fame, but because it was the only thing that made him feel real. But John wasn't content being the weird kid with the guitar. He wrote the songs that healed millions, but no one ever stopped to ask who was going to heal him. Before he was John Denver, the icon, he was just a struggling songwriter with a broken heart and a dream that nobody seemed to care about. He didn't have the voice yet. He didn't have the image. What he had was a song, one song. Leaving on a jet plane, you know it, everyone does. It's the kind of song that hurts in a beautiful way. But here's the twist. When it hit #1 across the country, it wasn't John singing it. Peter, Paul, and Mary were the faces, the voices, the brand. And John? He was just the guy with the pen, a ghost behind the curtain of fame. That song launched their career even higher. But for John, it was bittersweet. He'd written the perfect ballad. He'd cracked the code. But instead of standing in the spotlight, he was backstage, watching someone else live his dream. Imagine it, your soul, your heartbreak, your genius. And nobody even knows it came from you. That moment could have crushed him. For most artists, it would have. But John Denver wasn't most artists. He didn't give up. He doubled down. And the next time he picked up a guitar, he wasn't writing for others. He was writing to be heard, to be felt. He dropped hit after hit like emotional grenades. Take Me Home, Country Roads, Annie's Song, Rocky Mountain High, Sunshine on My Shoulders, Thank God I'm a Country Boy. These weren't just songs. They were weapons of nostalgia. If you turned on your TV in the 1970s, chances are you saw him smiling. That shaggy blonde hair, that gentle smile, those wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like the safe, sweet boy your mom would trust with the family dog. But behind the soft voice and wholesome image was a man barely holding it together. John Denver wasn't just a singer. He became an empire, a one-man brand. TV specials, movies, award shows, presidential invitations. He even starred in a hit film with George Burns. Oh God, America loved him. But fame doesn't love you back. And the pressure to be perfect, to keep being America's sweetheart, it was slowly killing him. He wasn't just writing about sunshine anymore. He was dealing with battling expectations, failed marriages, and a private war with himself. Here's what fans never saw. Behind the scenes, John Denver was beginning to spiral. He was fighting to be taken seriously in an industry that saw him as too soft. He wanted to evolve artistically, but was trapped in the very image that made him famous. And that disconnect? It was brutal. He started to withdraw, get angry. He made erratic choices. He once chainsawed his marital bed in half during a divorce. That's not a metaphor. He actually did it. Publicly, he smiled. Privately, he raged, grieved, and broke. But still, he kept performing, kept advocating for peace, the environment, and love. Because even though he was falling apart, he knew the world needed someone who sounded whole. And that's the heartbreaking irony. The man who sang about healing never really healed himself. October 12th, 1997. A calm day off. So now that you've seen what he survived, and how fame, heartbreak, and pressure were already closing in, what do you think really happened in the end? A tragic accident, or something darker beneath the surface? Let me know what you believe in the comments. You know the songs, you know the smile. But what you probably don't know is how broken he really was. By the late 80s, John Denver wasn't just famous. He was trapped in his own legend. The public saw a gentle troubadour. But behind the scenes, there was a man losing grip. And the cracks weren't subtle anymore. He was still performing, still appearing on TV, still talking about saving the planet. But inside, something was quietly, violently falling apart. The real John Denver? He was battling depression, isolation, and the scars of 2 failed marriages. He hated being misunderstood. He hated the soft label. And more than anything, he hated that no one saw his pain. Friends described him as restless, erratic, and sometimes even reckless. He'd flip from joyful and charismatic to withdrawn and bitter in a heartbeat. He had money, he had fans, but he didn't have peace. And it got worse. He started flying more, obsessively. Some say it was freedom, others say it was escape. He bought more planes, took more risks, started tinkering with experimental aircraft, the kind that would make seasoned pilots nervous. Privately, his close circle was worried, but no one stopped him. And he wouldn't have listened anyway. He was John Denver, the man who wrote Rocky Mountain High, the guy who sang about soaring above the clouds. But in reality, he was spiraling, fast. Let's rewind. October 12, 1997. John takes off in his Rutan Long EZ, a sleek experimental aircraft he wasn't fully trained on. Minutes later, it nosedives into the Pacific Ocean. He doesn't survive. And suddenly, headlines around the world are screaming, "Tragic accident," "Pilot error," "Icon gone too soon." But here's the uncomfortable truth. It wasn't just an accident. When investigators dug into the wreckage, what they found was chilling. The plane had a known design flaw. The fuel valve, critical for switching tanks mid-flight, was located behind the pilot's seat. That's right. You had to twist your entire body mid-air just to reach it. And John? He had already complained about it. Let that sink in. The plane he was flying when he died had a dangerous flaw, and he knew it. But no one fixed it. No one grounded the plane. No warning. No correction. No accountability. Even worse, Denver didn't even have the proper training to handle that specific aircraft configuration. He wasn't legally allowed to fly it solo due to medical restrictions. And yet, he was in the air. No co-pilot, no safety backup, no margin for error. He ran out of fuel in one tank, tried to switch, couldn't reach the valve in time. Engine dies. Plane drops. John Denver is gone. And here's the most disturbing part. This entire thing could have been prevented with better aircraft regulations, with real safety inspections, with someone, anyone, listening to his warnings. But no one did. And now the man who wrote "Sunshine on My Shoulders" died in the dark, cold waters of the Pacific because of systemic failure. Not just mechanical, human, emotional, institutional. So you tell me, was this just bad luck? Or was the John Denver crash a slow-motion tragedy that no one dared to stop? John Denver gave the world beauty, but the world didn't protect him in return. His music still plays, his words still heal, but the story behind that final flight? It's a lesson in how even the brightest stars can fall when we don't pay attention. So next time you hear Rocky Mountain High, remember, behind the high notes was a man screaming to be heard.